we have a full agenda tonight. So I am going to start. We are not going to get into the exciting presentation for a little bit. So I'll just be covering some housekeeping things. I'm Renee Scott. I'm the Pollinator Network Coordinator for NOFA Mass, and I'm so glad to see everyone here at our September meeting. Thank you for joining. And we have a very exciting program on seed collecting. And so we will be getting to that in a minute, but we're going to start with a few other things. And let's see. To start, there is an event coming up this Thursday, the 28th. It's 7 p.m. It's Lexington Living Landscapes and the Pollinator Network are co-sponsoring Sarah Evans and her presentation, Lawn and Garden Chemicals in Children's Health. And I'm going to drop a link in the chat. It is a entirely virtual presentation, and there's plenty of room. So I think it's going to be really interesting, and I recommend that you join. And we also have, you've probably been hearing this from me from all different places, newsletters and emails and stuff, but there are 3 political actions that we are really hoping people will work on right now. 2 are at the national level. We have USDA, so this is a national level, USDA pollinator plant labeling, which would be really important. They would be required to label native plants and also say if there were pesticides in them. So I'm going to drop a link to that action. We have made some handy letters that you can just sign, easily. It's a form letter and you can sign it. You can change it if you want. It's always super effective to actually reach out to your representatives by email or phone call, but these letters are also really good too. So if you have 30 seconds, send one of these letters. If you have 2 minutes, then you can call or email. So that is one. I'm sorry, I put the wrong one in the chat. So the one I just put in the chat, I will tell you about right now. That's the other national piece of legislation, and that is Saving America's Pollinators Act. And it's really comprehensive. It's about pesticides, it's about habitat, and we are trying to get more co-sponsors on it. So right now, I can't remember how many co-sponsors, maybe 28 or something, not enough. So I strongly encourage you to reach out, again, through this form letter or on your own. Ask your networks to do the same. It's, the chances of it passing are slim, but the more pressure we put on our legislators, the more chance that they will start taking this stuff seriously. So I do recommend doing that. So that was the first link I sent. And now I'm going to send you the link to the one I was telling you about first, which is the pollinator labeling. And that is here. And then the third one is a local action. It is about neonicotinoids, which are the pesticides that are systemic in plants, and so even if it's a native plant, it can attract a pollinator, and then the pollinator takes a bite and either dies or it can build up in their system. It can really mess with the navigation systems of bees. It can become addictive to pollinators, so it's really nasty pesticide. And this is originally was started by Rep. Dykema, and she did not run again, but her the representative, the state rep who took her place, is James Arena DeRosa, and he picked up this bill. It had restricted it. They got it. It was successful in that it stops, like you can't just go to a store and buy a neonic pesticide right now. But there's still a lot of work to do. I don't want to waste everyone's time because we want to move on to our main presentation, but the letter explains in more detail why it's important. And I'm going to drop that link in the chat as well. So these are the 3 actions that would be really terrific if you do yourself and share with your friends, neighbors, and networks. There's also an idea that has come up in discussions of this could take a whole meeting unto itself. And so I'm just going to promo it And then anyone interested, I would ask you to email me. Oh, resend the first links. Yes. Sorry, I will resend all of the links once we move on to other things. And the idea is trying to get the network to start doing outreach across the state. We really do cover the state. We have people in, I don't know how many towns, but in so many regions of the state, and getting groups of maybe 3 to 4 people who have a preset presentation, and they could go to their library, they could go to local schools, they could do presentations at civic centers. So the idea, so what I'm asking for help with is anyone interested in being on a working group to figure out how that would work. And if you're interested in doing that, please email me and I will coordinate a meeting time and we can start talking about what that would even look like. So I will put my email in the chat. You can email me directly. I'm sorry, I auto-filled with my, ignore the accent in that. I'm gonna do that again.
Renee, are you talking about a speakers bureau sort of thing?
Yes, sorry. So I didn't describe that very well. Yes, it would be, I mean, this is, I guess the working group would figure out exactly what it would be, but sort of the need was, we have volunteers who will go to different locations and do, speak to different parts of about native plants or about pollinators or about fall cleanup in your garden or how not to clean up in your garden or whatever it is. Like we'll have volunteers go out and speak. But we were thinking it would be really interesting to try to do much more coordinated outreach across the state and maybe have even some sort of preset slideshows, presentations that people could work off of so they didn't, if they felt overwhelmed by creating their own slide deck or coming up with the information. And that's about as far as we got in these discussions. I was talking to a couple.
We have something like that for our Andover Pollinator Pathway group already. So maybe that could be built upon.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, we don't need to recreate the wheel for sure. So that would be wonderful. If you're interested in working with me, or even just, even if you want to just remind me of what that was, I would ask that you just email me and we can talk about it. That would be great. Okay, so now we have one last thing before we get to our seed collecting presentation, and that is we have updates from a few groups across the state and just sort of what they've been working on. Because we want to have a chance to hear Whitney's full presentation, we're going to stick to 1 minute per group, and I apologize that it's so fast, but I think that we're all here to hear Whitney. So the first group that we were going to get an update from is, or the first person is Isabel Bailey from the Concord Pollinator Health Advisory Committee. And Isabel, if you are here, if you would.
Yes, I'm here.
Great.
So we're working on, I do a lot of winter sow workshops, and in conjunction with our natural resources person, she wants native seeds that are pure to our region. And so we are not doing seed collection because we don't know the source of the plants that we have already here. So this is a whole new change. We're going to order seeds for the seed sowing and making it that way. I gave a talk. We have a talk tomorrow night where we're showing Doug Tallamy's webinar, trying to get native people interested in native plants together. We did a booth at our Ag Day, which was a big success. And I did a talk to our climate action group, but we don't have a focus group in Concord, Mass. And so that's what I'm working on with several other people. We have been planting 6 pollinator gardens in conservation land, but it's now gotten so that the director wants pure seed that it doesn't have chemicals and is not from Ohio or wherever. So it's a new focus. And what I'm doing for Lincoln, I'm doing a workshop beginning of December, and then I'm setting up several in Concord in January.
Great. Thank you so much, Isabel. Our next update is from Barbara Pastro. Barbara, are you here? Barbara? Okay. And our final update is from Brucey Moulton, and it's about Arlington and invasives. Brucey, do you want to unmute?
I'm speaking on behalf of a group called Arlington Mass Invasives with the acronym ARMY. I occasionally volunteer with them. Recently, Arlington's Department of Planning and Community Development, our Conservation Commission, and the Arlington Mass Invasives Group held a public event called Pink Plant Invasives at Robbins Library. Different types of invasive plants had been identified near the library, and just before the presentation, volunteers with the Army used eco-friendly pink spray paint to highlight these harmful species. At the event, they talked about which invasive species grow in Arlington. I showed how to identify them, talked about their invasive habits and how best to get rid of them when they appear in your own yard. The public then got a chance to try their hand at removing some of the invasives alongside trained volunteers. Later this fall, native climate adaptive plants appropriate for the library location will be planted to take the place of the invasives that were removed. And I'm going to put in the chat the Pink Plant Invasives at Robbins Library handout, because I think it's a really interesting thing that they've done, and it's just such a great example of the town and a volunteer group teaming up to address a widespread problem.
Thank you, Brucey.
You're welcome.
That was all.
Who did the talk on the invasives?
It was Elaine Crowder who founded ARMY, and she was working with Arlington's environment planner and conservation agent, David Morgan. And the contact information for ARMY is on the handout that I put into the chat just now.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anna, did you have a quick question? You're muted, Anna.
Are you finished, Brucey? Oh, thank you. I just wanted to alert people to the fact that they're trying to put into the new farm bill, which would be the law for 5 years, that no state or locality like a town could have a pesticide law stronger than this United States, the federal law. And this seems to be undercutting a lot of our efforts. So I've put in the chat under some of Brucey's stuff, the link to the explanation and how you can take action. This is, I think anyway, pretty serious, because it is taking away one of our most useful ways of getting around things. I know in Massachusetts, our local law, we're fighting to get our local laws to supersede the state law, and that's difficult as well. So if you could sign that, or rather write your legislators in their forms and explanations and everything in that link. And the other thing was the Berkshire Botanical Gardens did you already announce this, Renee?
No, thank you, Anna. I did not. Thank you.
Yeah, the Berkshire Botanical Gardens is having their fall festival on October 7th and 8th. I think it's the 38th year or something like that. It's very well attended, and we're doing a table for those 2 days. So if anybody would like to work on it, we still need some people, particularly in the afternoons. But it's fun, and you can see the gardens, and there are just lots of things going on.
Where is this?
The Berkshire Botanical Gardens, it's in Stockbridge, in Berkshire County. It's quite easy to get to. And
If anyone
Pardon me?
Oh, sorry, Anna, I thought you were finished. I was gonna say, if anyone is able to volunteer, feel free to email me. I put my email in the chat and I can connect you with Anna.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. So without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce Whitney Troy. She was a previous intern at Native Plant Trust, and she is going to give us a presentation on the whys, whens, and hows of seed saving. Whitney?
Hi, I'm just gonna share my screen first.
And actually, I'll just quickly say, if you have questions, Whitney, I don't know if you want to be interrupted with questions, maybe if it's a something that's very timely to what you just said, but if it's a general question, hold it or put it in the chat. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank
Okay.
you.
Awesome. And I will be monitoring the chat. So if someone has a very timely question, I'm happy to note it and break in if need be.
Okay. Thank you. Hi, I'm Whitney. So I'm here to talk to you today about seed collection, cleaning seed, and storing it. And I just wanted to give you a little background about myself. I had been a landscape gardener, so essentially like ornamental horticulture for 7 to 8 years for private properties. And I started to realize how damaging that was to the environment. And as life would have it, I started encountering different events that allowed me to kind of gain an interest in native plants. And last year, I interned at Garden in the Woods with their propagator, and I fell in love with propagation. And since then, I've been working at a small native plant nursery, Earth Tones. It's in Woodbury, Connecticut, and I'm primarily working with herbaceous plants, and so that's what I know a lot about. I am not that well versed in native trees and shrubs, so if there's any questions about those I cannot answer, I definitely am more than happy to do a little research or ask a fellow propagator, but I just wanted to give that little disclosure beforehand. So let's see. Okay, so the reasons to collect. It was nice to hear someone was speaking about how there is an initiative to collect seed that's as local as possible. And the reason for that, why it's so great to collect from plants as local as your backyard or near you, is this that goes with this concept of ecoregions and ecotypic plants. And I don't know if a lot of you have heard about ecoregions, but it's pretty much these areas that have the same or very similar ecosystems, and that they normally have the same things like climate, geology, soil, vegetation, wildlife, and more. And so an ecotypic plant is one that is genetically adapted to survive in these certain environmental conditions. And if you are planting for insects in the wildlife around you, why you want these ecotypic plants is because they have co-evolved with these insects to provide the right nutrition and habitat for them. And also these plants are going to be able to survive better in the areas that you're from and where you're collecting the seed from. So a good example of this is, like, say you collected seed of echinacea from South Carolina, and then you also collected seed from South Hadley, and you live in South Hadley, Massachusetts. The South Hadley collected seed is probably going to grow better in your backyard because it has adapted to be able to tolerate really rough winters. So it'll just be a healthier plant all around. And then what I love about collecting seed for this group especially is that, you're able to trade seed and build a community doing so. And I think that's really a special thing.
Whitney, we
Yeah.
don't, are you showing us slides right now? Because we don't see slides.
Oh, no. Okay. Is it just blank?
It's just, it looks like all the faces are just the boxes, like everyone's.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on one second. Oh, I apologize. Yes, it was supposed to be sharing.
There we
Sorry
go.
about that.
No, that's great. We can see it
It's
now.
working now? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so I know a lot of you are planning on just collecting seed at home in your gardens, but I've been hearing more about wild seed collection, which that's what we do at our nursery. I work for, and sometimes Native Plant Trust does that as well. So I just wanted to go over that very briefly. So the most important thing is to get permission when you're wild seed collecting. I'm assuming that the property that you're trying to collect seed from, if it's wild, that you don't own that property. So it's always good to just get the owner's permission to do so. And this is not just only because they own the land, but also because they'll have an idea if this seed is already being collected, because we don't want to over harvest from a plant, especially when it's a wild plant. And the second thing is you want to assess the population size. So you want to only be collecting from a large population. If you go to a site and there's only one ironweed, then you probably don't want to collect from that plant, right? Because you want that plant to be able to repopulate and spread its seed. And that leads me to the next rule of thumb, which is normally you want to collect no more than 20% of an individual plant. So that this makes sure that the plant can again reproduce and spread its seed around the area. And also that helps provide food for wildlife that might be relying on that throughout the fall into winter. And lastly, you want to spread out collection among individual plants for genetic diversity. So if you're at a site and you're collecting one type of species, right, you'll collect from one plant and then maybe walk a few hundred more feet and then collect from the same species of a different plant. So you just want to be sure you spread it out. So these are just tools that I use to collect when I collect. And I like to ID what I'm going to collect. It's just good practice to have. So I have on the next slide a list of books and resources for you guys to look at. And I asked Renee to send the PowerPoint afterwards, so you'll have that list. And I refer to those all the time. So I also use a hand lens just to help me ID better. Hand pruners and scissors. So you probably, if you're going to be collecting both fleshy and dry seed, which I show examples of later, you're going to want plastic bags for the fleshy seed. So that's like fruit, like if you're collecting like blueberries, let's say. And then brown paper bags for like dry seed if you're collecting like an aster or echinacea or something. And then it's great to label those bags. So I normally label the plant name, location where I got the plant, and the date, and also just any other notes. And I also like to have like a journal or a seed log. And this is because if you want to collect seed, let's say next year of the same plant, then you have a general idea of when the seed will be ready for the following year. So here's my list of books. So this is for identification, and then for collection, I really liked all of Kalina's books. He's really great. For the most part, sometimes he doesn't go into too much detail about what a seed will look like when it's ready, but you can also find a lot of this information online as well. So just getting into collecting. So the first thing I do is identifying the plant, like I said previously, using those resources. And it's easier to do this when the plant's in flower. And after it's gone to flower, you might just want to constantly check the plant to see when the seed is ready. So then you want to identify if the seed is dry or fleshy, because that's going to change how you're going to be collecting that seed and probably how long it'll take for it to ripen. So I have a picture here of the mountain mint, and here the seed isn't totally ready, this green part. A lot of times with dry seed, it turns from a green color into like this tan, brown, grayish color. depending on the seed. And you'll notice that actually there's holes on the top of the seed here. And if you were to turn that pod over, there would be little tiny seeds that fall out of it. And so that you would assume, right, that that's when the seed is ready. And that's pretty true for most of the mountain mints and also for the bee balms. And you can also tell when a dry seed is ready when they'll start to open up or the seed starts to disperse. And there's all different types of dry seeds. And I have a slide too showing different types of dry seeds of common plants. So then this is the fleshy fruit that I was talking about. This is actually Jack in the Pulpit. A lot of that fruit often turns into different colors when it's ripe. Again, you can look online and you can probably find out what the seed looks like once it's ripened. And time is important here. So I know I said like consistently checking back. And in my previous slide with the mint, you can see like some of it is ready, some of it's not, right? So I actually will harvest like continuously throughout the week or within a couple of days, even like weeks. And so, but we're still like fighting against, you know, natural occurrences. So, you know, you're still trying to get the seed before the birds eat all of it. Or if there's a big storm coming, you know, you don't want all that seed to be knocked out before you collect some of it when it's ready. A good rule too is collecting when it's dry. So I normally always wait till the mid-afternoon and when the morning dew is dried out. And also I never collect on like rainy days, sometimes even like the day after it's rainy. When you collect, you want to try to cut only the seed head. And this is because if you're collecting and you're cutting like the leaves, the stems, it just allows for room for like insects to stay in the bag once you collect, and also for the seed to start molding because you have all that debris. And if you're collecting from your home garden, you can really take all the seed, but I really encourage you to leave some for wildlife and for reseeding, you know, because I think that's the reason that we're all doing this is for the wildlife and insects. It's best to keep, like I said before, it's best to keep the dry seed in a paper bag. So when you're collecting, so here I've actually have like, this is what I use normally to collect dry seed. And you want to keep that seed in the paper bag for a few days in like a dry, cool area before cleaning. And this is just because you want that seed to be as dry as possible before actually storing it. For fleshy seed and seed that cannot dry out. So the Jack in the Pulpit is one that cannot dry out. I know a few of the anemones are ones. A lot of those woodland spring ephemerals cannot dry out. You want to keep those seeds in the fridge if you cannot clean them right away. And so that's a good practice to use. Otherwise, they'll start molding and rotting out, and then it'll ruin the seed. And the sooner you clean it, the better. That's a good rule. And say if you notice your seed has a lot of insects and there might be larvae in the seed, it would be a good idea to put your seed in the freezer for, you know, a few weeks. And this is primarily with the dry seed that you're going to be wanting to do that. And you want the seed to be pretty dry when you do it. So here's different types of dry seed. I just thought like more common seed. So this is the big blue stem right here, and you can see it's ready. It kind of puffs out a bit. Here's the echinacea that is ready. It's just completely dried out. That's one that birds definitely compete with to try to get to it before the birds eat a lot of it. Here's the common milkweed. And that like starts to open up, it browns out and starts to open. And then this is the an aster. I'm sorry, I don't deal with sales a lot, so I don't know a lot of the common names, but it's the patents, and this is a good example of a seed that is ready right here, so it's completely puffed out. versus this right here is still not mature enough. It's still kind of enclosed. So you'll know that the seed is ready with a lot of the asters when they're like completely open. And then right here, this is kind of a tricky picture to see, I apologize, but it is little blue stem. And so it has these little like tufts when it's ready. Okay, so now that you have a little background about how to collect, you can start getting ready to clean. So these are tools that I use. You need a clean, clear space because as you can imagine, this takes up a lot of space. Seed kind of can fly everywhere, so it's great to have a clear area to work with. So at work, I have like different sieves, like screens that we use, and they're different sizes. Now these can get expensive, so what I definitely have seen people use and I've used myself are just like, you know, sifters at home that you have or a colander, things like that are really helpful. You start getting really creative about what to use when you start cleaning seed. Just you'll come up with different ideas and different tools probably around your kitchen or around your house to use. Bowls, you know, just to have a nice container. Manila folders, cardboard or paper, just because it's easier to like roll the seed or keep it on a nice flat surface while you're trying to put it back into storage. Containers, I like to use these plastic takeout containers, and I'm gonna quickly explain why later. And if you're dealing with the fleshy seed, so that fruity seed, you're gonna want to have water access and a tea kettle or burner. And then also, if you're dealing with the fleshy seed, a pestle and mortar is really helpful at times, just to kind of smash up that seed. And I've also seen people use rolling pins for like capsuled seed. And then paper clip or needle is really nice when you're dealing with like echinacea. So the first thing is like familiarize yourself with the seed. I actually like the challenge of not looking up any information at first about how other people have cleaned the seed because I think it's kind of the fun part about cleaning seed is to mess around, figure out what actually is the seed, and then just finding the best technique. I personally don't mind taking a lot of time. I know some people get frustrated and they want to get as much seed cleaned as soon as possible. So I guess it depends on the person. And the cleaning technique is going to depend on the type of seed you are working with, right? So before I totally get into that, I just wanted to preface that, like, I think there is how clean you want your seed, right? So how clean you don't like, if you don't want that debris, like, or anything. I think milkweed is a good example of this, and I'm going to actually physically show you guys. So milkweed has that pappus, which is that part of the seed that is wind dispersed. So here is a milkweed seed. And you can see the pappus is right here, right? And this is the actual seed. So because, I don't know, hopefully you guys can see that. Because it's larger seed, I don't mind just taking the time to like pluck it off. And you can even like rub it in your hands and the pappus will come off. And that's pretty clean, right? But then for like an aster, which I have here, the seed is very, very tiny compared to the pappus, and there's just so, it's really hard to see, sorry. But it's really hard to clean that seed completely and properly. So I normally would just keep that seed on with the hair on it. But I will say that I'm not really storing this seed for very long, maybe like 2 or 3 years at the most. So it really depends on how long you want to be storing the seed as to how clean you want it to be. Obviously, the cleaner, the better, because it's less likely to mold or rot or decay. And so for fleshy seeds, I normally do like a fermentation. And so what I do is once the seed is ripe, I collected it in a plastic like sandwich bag, and I will add some water in there, and then I'll let it sit for maybe a day or two so the water can just really like ferment in the bag. And then all I do is I just smash the fruit so you get all the seed to remove itself from the fruit, and then I'll just put it through a strainer and try to clear off all that flesh. So for dry seed, what's great about dry seed is that that a lot of that seed, once you put it in the brown paper bag, a lot of that seed will fall out of the pod or whatever it's in the seed head. So like the mint will fall out of the seed head. Even echinacea at times will do it as well. And it'll all collect down at the bottom of the bag, and then you're able to just pour it all out and have it there. For wind dispersed seed, like I said before, if it's larger for like with like milkweed, I'll just kind of rub it in my hand to try to get all that pappus to come together. For seed pods, larger like legumes, those are really easy. You just pop them open. So Baptisia is a good example of that. And then using the sieves. So what I would do, for example, is like if I have, let's see, I do wish this was in person because it's a little tricky to show you on Zoom. But what I would do is if I have Rudbeckia here, I have a Rudbeckia seed head. And so what I would do normally is I would put it in a screen and I would just kind of like rub it on top of the screen and then have it catch into one of these, like this plastic container. And so you're not going to have just the seed, right? You're going to have all that other debris that comes with the seed head. And what I would do is I would just blow lightly, and that seed is heavy enough that hopefully all that will blow out will be all the dirt and the like broken down part of the seed head. And again, it is definitely a process, and you just play with it and play with it and play with it. And lastly, what I would do with that is once I have the seed clean enough that I think it's clean enough, again, because it's a heavier seed, I would just fold up a piece of paper, put the seed in, put what I have left on in the paper, and just kind of roll it down into this type of envelope is normally what I store seed in. And hopefully it will be mostly just the seed. For storage, so like I said before, there's plants that need to be sown ASAP. They cannot dry out. And so again, you should really look up those seeds. A lot of them are those spring ephemerals, so it really won't be too many seeds like right now that are available, but it's good to still just double check and make sure. And so those you'll just want to sow right away and probably stick them outside. And I'll go into that a little bit in a few moments. But if you actually have the seeds stored in these envelopes, that's what I like to store them in. You want to keep them in a cool, dark, and low humid condition. I mean, at my work, we keep them in just like our office, like in a tall cabinet, and try to just keep the humidity low in that room. And seeds do have different storage viability. So I've been trying to keep track of like what has been, because we have a lot of seed collected throughout the years, what is viable. I've been able to find a lot of that information online as well, which has been really helpful, and just word of mouth, talking to other propagators. And lastly, I just wanted to quickly mention this process of cold stratification that a lot of our seeds that are native to this area need. And so what that means, I'm not sure how familiar you all are with that. I didn't really fully go into that because I didn't have a ton of time and wanted to make sure that I kept under 20 minutes. And so I just, sorry, so what it is that because they're native seeds here, go through a process of winter, right? They go through winter. A lot of them need like mimicking that winter period. So what I do is I have that seed collected normally, and like they normally need a 60 to 30 day cold stratification, sometimes even longer, 90 day or 120 days. It depends on the seed. And I'll put them in a plastic bag with either sand or peat and a little bit of water. And then I'll put them in the refrigerator for that period of time and then take them out to sow. If you don't want to use the fridge, you can just sow the seed normally in December and just stick those trays outside, and hopefully in the spring they'll germinate. But that could be like a whole other 10-minute presentation. So yeah, so if there's anything else that you want to know that I don't answer today, just feel free to contact me with any other questions. Here's my email. But thank you guys.
Whitney, thank you so much. That was awesome. Kate, do you want to ask a question?
I do. Did you say December for planting seeds that need stratification?
Yeah, I mean, you could do January. I've thrown seeds out like January, February, and they've been fine. It's just the earlier is probably better. With a good rule of thumb is just all we're trying to constantly do is mimic nature. So if you see like a milkweed, right, and you're trying to sow milkweed seed outside, and you just want to throw it outside, not deal with using the fridge and like creating that artificial cold stratification, just notice when that seed is dropping, which is like in Connecticut it is right now, right? So I would just throw that seed out and like, as soon as it's ready, and just spread it around.
Okay, is there any problem for some? The reason I'm asking is UMass is doing a pollinator study in my yard, and they're sending me seed. And I looked up the list of the seed, and about 60% of the seed needs cold stratification, and about 40% doesn't. So I'm wondering if it makes sense to, and we decided that we would plant in the fall rather than the spring, since a lot of that seed needed stratification. Would it make sense to plant some of it now and let it germinate before the winter for the seed that doesn't need stratification? And will that be detrimental to the seed that does need stratification to be sown now? And should I wait to sow some of it?
Yeah, so I would wait to sow the seed that doesn't need cold stratification until the spring. As far as the seed that
It's a
doesn't,
mix.
oh,
It's a mix.
okay.
It's about there's like 40 species in there.
Yeah. So I think it would be okay to spread it now, because a lot of plants that don't need cold stratification, I even still cold stratify, because I find that it has a better uniform germination rate. So if I cold stratify it, they'll all germinate at once well, and I just find them to be hardier plants personally. And I assume because it's UMass's project that it is probably these plants that were sourced locally, or the seed was sourced locally. So they would probably appreciate a cold stratification. So I would probably just sow it in the fall, early winter.
Okay, by fall, do you mean now?
Yeah, I think you could do it now, or maybe wait till like end of October might be a little better.
Okay, good. That's good to know. Thank you.
We had a question in the chat from Mary, and Mary says, milkweed seeds. I've been told to put the seed with fluff in a paper bag add a penny or two, and shake the bag to separate the seed and fluff. Then cut a small hole in the bottom corner of the bag and shake out the seeds. Thoughts on this? Will it damage the seeds?
I don't think it will damage the seeds. I actually really like this. That's a pretty cool technique. This is what I mean. I really love hearing and like finding out other people's techniques of cleaning seed. I think the seed will be totally fine. I kind of wish we were in person because it would be easier for me to show you, but I will say that milkweed sometimes isn't, it's a good seed to be able to tell whether or not it's viable. And really it's because it gets really fat. And if you actually open up the seed, you'll see like the embryo, the whiteness of it. But I think that would be totally fine.
I have a question for you. And I'm sorry, I cannot remember what species of seeds these were, but in the past I've ordered seeds that I'm supposed to scarify. And I'm just wondering what is that mimicking in nature?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up because I had that in my presentation and took it out because I didn't know if I would have enough time. So scarification is a few ways that happens in nature, right? A bird will eat a seed and then it digests it and poop it out, right? So that's scarification. Also, if a seed, a lot of like the carex, so the sorry again with the common names, there's these types of grasses, right, that are very thick seeds and they have a very hard seed shell. And a lot of them are actually wetland species. So they like that like roughness of the sand. And if you think about like if they're even like going through currents or water patterns, that they're getting roughed up by the rocks around them. So it could be anything like that. And as far as like what you can do for scarification, there's two different ways that I do it. I sandpaper them down if you have the time, which I think is the most effective way. Or you can boil them in hot water for 24 hours. I honestly, if I were to do this on a smaller scale and I didn't feel so pressured for time, I would do both because I find that to be the most effective.
Wait, boil them for 24 hours?
But I would sandpaper them down first and then boil them in hot water for 24 hours or just have them sit in hot water for 24 hours.
Okay, wow. And that won't kill, obviously, that's not going to kill them to boil them.
No,
Okay,
no.
cool. Kate, yes.
What plants normally need this scarification?
Yeah, so like I said, it's a lot of the carex, which are the sedges, and iris is another one that likes a scarification. And if you think of that, like the wetland iris, the native one, that one is sitting in that wet area, so that is going to be going in that rough, sandy environment once it's dropped. There are some trees and shrubs. I'm not sure which ones off the top of my head, but I know a few of those like a scarification as well. There are a lot of the legumes, so Baptisia, the Tephrosia is another one. Again, I really apologize. I don't know a lot of the common names, but anything that's kind of a legume like the Lespedizas, those like a scarification as well.
Kate, you'd had your hand up. Did you have another question?
Hi, I had the same question about boiling for 24 hours. I'm assuming it's boil and then let it soak.
Yes, sorry. Yes. Yes.
Do you have any other questions?
Hello, this is Mark. Whitney, I know you said you don't know much about trees, but I was wondering how much experience you've had with trying to propagate oaks from oak trees. It's one of my favorite trees. Have you had any experience? Thanks.
So, I haven't, but I am more than happy to find out any information you would like. If you want to shoot me an email, and just if you have a specific question or just a general question in general, any tips on propagating that, I would be more than happy to ask my friend who is really into tree propagation with native plants, especially if you have a specific species that you'd like to know about.
Great. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Maria?
Yes, I did that with acorns with my grandkids a few years ago. And I remember the refrigerator was involved. But I remember, Mark, that there was a lot online about it. That's where I found out how to do it.
Thanks, Maria.
I have seen, I don't know if it's a gimmick or not, but I've seen planters that it's a glass vase that has a little cup for the acorn, and then you put water all the way up to the base, sort of like an avocado, if you were going to try to sprout an avocado seed, and then the roots grow down and you can see them. And I don't know how, I mean, the pictures look lovely. I don't know if it's effective, but I actually agree with Kate. Squirrels, or my son will pop acorns all over, and I just have them sprouting up all over. So I don't know, maybe they're easier than we think.
Well, one of the keys is squirrels.
Yeah.
So you have to screen them from both below and above. So it's a pretty significant process to be able to propagate them successfully. So I was wondering if anybody had any tricks. So I'll write to Whitney, and we can see if we can find something out. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark.
Welcome.
And Maria, do you have another question? Okay, Isabel?
So along with that is I have lots of baby oak trees all over my yard because I have a large pin oak. And I was wondering if anybody had advice on how to dig those to share them. I know they're taproot, but how far down once they've got a full leaf set?
Does anyone have an answer for that? I do not.
Since I pull out tons and tons of oaks every year, if you can, probably if you get them at the two, once they've sent their 2 leaves, they start with 2 leaves. Once they send those 2 leaves off, they don't have a very deep root. So I think if you just dug up, it's not more than, the root is only about this long.
Actually,
once they've got
yeah.
those 2 leaves up, you could probably leave it a little bit longer.
Yep. It's going to depend a lot upon their age. This is Mark again. So as you can probably tell, I'm an arborist, and one of the things we did this year with the Mass Tree Wardens and Forest Association is we sell tree seedlings, and one of them is pin oaks. And it was astounding to see how deep the oaks are. Actually, just on the small seedlings, I bet that they were 10 inches or so, 10 inches anyway on our seedlings this year. It was crazy. And pin oaks, which are the red oak side of the house, they grow faster. So they tend to really shoot that deep taproot. So I guess my only advice would be to dig deeply and make sure you don't cut them off, because you really don't want to cut that taproot.
Thank you. Any other questions for Whitney? Well, Whitney, thank you so much. This was awesome. Really appreciate you presenting. Oh, do we have another question coming on here? Sorry, let me double check. Laura says, oh, for oaks, look at the Homegrown National Park for video for a resource. Okay, so sorry, that was not a question. And thank you so much. This was really terrific. I really appreciate you being willing to share your slides, which I will, I'll send the recording out, and I will also include the slide deck in that, and then I will send it to the slide deck to the larger group as well. So thank you. I don't know if you want to pop your email in the chat, just in case people had questions. You're so kind to share that with people. And thank you all for coming. Next month, we are going to be talking about how to not clean up your garden. So I hope you join us for that. And I will be sending out reminders. But anyway, you can just, oh, that's going to be October 24th. We're doing it a week earlier so it doesn't conflict with Halloween. But I will see you then. So Whitney, thank you again. It was a great presentation.
Thanks so much, you guys.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.